Hello folks, welcome to El Canal John Jose. Today we're going to give you an idea how we do the replacement of the radiator on this 94 to 2001 Acura Integra. And for this procedure, we already have our radiator ready for this car, and we already have our liquid or our coolant that is going to go in there. So with that, we're going to show you the procedures, pretty simple, so that way you can do it at home without spending a lot of money with shops. With that, let's get started. So here's a radiator, brand new one. Here's a liquid that we bought 2 gallons, so it's not going to take 2 gallons, but we bought just in case. So once we take the old radiator out and we put the new one, we're going to add this new coolant to the system. So we start with fresh coolant. But to start the procedure, we're going to take this bracket that is hugging the one of the AC lines against the chassis, so we can get this fan out of here. And we're going to have to disconnect the electrical from right there. There's 2 bolts on the top for this. This is in the driver's side. And then we're going to have to take that passenger side fan out too. But before we take that one out, we also have to go underneath and then get the plug open from the radiator and open it so we can get some of the liquid to drain out, so we can take that upper hose off of the radiator, so that way we can slide the fan out. So we're going to remove this bracket so we're able to extract the fan. And these 2 bolts are 10 millimeters. So we take off right here and then right here. If you have this bracket right here, all you do is just loosen this bolt right over here by the hose. It's just a clamp. And then take off this one on the frame and then spin it and then put that bolt back on so you don't lose it. So all you have to do is just loosen that so we can have this bracket out of the way when we extract the fan. So now what we do is we disconnect our plug on the fan, and then we take off 2 10 millimeter bolts that are attaching the fan to the radiator. So now that we have the fan almost coming out and disconnected, there's one thing that you gotta watch out. You see this cable right here. Is attached to the structure of the fan. So we gotta disconnect this from here, or be careful when you're taking it out. And then another thing is, once you get that guy undone from there, you want to pull the radiator to the driver's side a little bit like that, so it comes out of there, and then you pull it straight up slowly, because we got the 2 bolts, but that's keeping it from rattling into the radiator, and then plus a little wire that is down there. So what we're going to have to do with the screwdriver, we're going to press this side in like that and close it in, kind of twist it a little bit, pull it through, and then come over into the other side and press the other little tab so it goes all the way through. So this is the radiator from the facing towards the front, and this is going to be sliding just like this into the slot or the space. And for us, we're going to expose that. You're looking now, you turn it around, and then we're looking for that drain point. And the drain point is towards the lower hose of the radiator. This is the attachment for the lower hose, and right here is the drain point of the radiator. So you're actually right below the fan on the passenger side. So what you're looking is from the hose fitment, your inner, just about a couple inches, this is the drain point on the radiator. That we're exposing this, so when you're going in there, you know where you're looking for this, because we gotta drain liquid out of it, and this is the point where you drain it out. Here's our coolant drain pan. So we're gonna put it right underneath the passenger fan, because the drain point is right on this side. So we need to drain as much as we can, because the upper hose and the lower hose have to come off to replace this radiator, and we have to drain all the liquid. So we are gonna capture it on this. So that's where we're gonna slide it into. So another thing we can do as well, we can disconnect this hose that goes to the overflow reservoir for the coolant. Now we have the coolant coming out of the radiator because we opened the drain point, and now we can take that radiator cap off, so the radiator actually takes gravity and it just feeds, it just starts dropping. Now in the meantime that the coolant is draining out, we'll take this clamp off, slide the hose off of it, so we can start sliding and taking off the fan from the radiator. Both hoses are probably gonna get stuck to the radiator. So when you remove the clamp and you start trying to taking it off, it's not gonna budge. What you do is you just turn it so it breaks loose, and then you start sliding it away from the radiator. So now what we can do, once we remove the upper hose, we can remove this and that other bolt that are 10 millimeter, so that way we can start separating the fan from the radiator. So the fan is already loose from the structure, so we got it to maneuver. So we have this clip that we have to undo from the structure of the fan, so we can unplug it as well, and we can extract it from there. So we gotta undo that from back here and then unplug it so we can drag it out. So now we have disconnected our fan, everything's loose here. So what we do is we just pull it towards the engine a little bit, and then we slide it up slowly and careful. So we have, there's a drain point that we were talking about. So we're gonna close that completely so we can remove that pan, and our radiator's almost out. So if you're having trouble getting the clamp from the bottom off of the radiator, what you can do is you can remove the upper 10 millimeters bolts from the brackets that hold the radiator towards the frame. So that way you can take those off and you can pull the radiator up, and then you can grab pliers and play with it while it's still in there. So because sometimes we can't do that because the air conditioning lines are on the way. As you can see, the air conditioning lines are right next to it, so we don't want to damage those. So what we can do is we can pull the radiator up, because this hose that goes into the engine is more flexible than those hard lines from the AC. So once we pull it up, we give it some space between that, and we can work on that clamp. So this is what we were talking about. You can remove even the hose from the engine on for this one, so you can take it all out, or you can drag it up and then you can remove that clamp from here. So that's why you close the drain point, so you can tilt it a little bit, work on this hose, slide the bracket away, and then that way you can start working with this hose off of this radiator. So you don't necessarily have to do it down there. So you can bring it up here because this hose is flexible. Now that we have our hose up here, we're gonna lower it into our drain pan, so all the liquid that is caught in there drains down to the pan. So we want to give you an idea how this radiator is going to fit in there while the fans are on. So these are the fans from the passenger side, and this is from the driver's side. This is the hose coming in from the passenger side, which is a lower hose right here. We got it exposed. And then another thing is that this is the drain point that we were talking about right here. And then this is the point where it's going to attach to the bottom frame of the car, and in this side over here as well. We're going to show you down there what we mean by that. And then on the top piece, there's one here and then another one here, that they go into these brackets that were bolted onto the upper piece. So that's just to give you an idea how this radiator sits in there with the fans on. So now that we said that, let's start putting it back together. They both bolt on with 10 millimeter on top, but the bottom, the passenger side, slides in just like it, both sides, and that's what holds the bottom. The top we bolt it down, and the driver's side, same thing. It slides right into this, and it bolts down with a 10 millimeter, two of them bolts. This is going to be the bottom of the radiator. This is the guide how it slides into, like this, one on one side and one on the other side. And these guys go on the frame of the car, and we're going to show you where they are. So the radiator slides right into this opening, which this is in the frame. So this is the cushion, this is a bushing, this is a shock absorber. So there's two set points on the bottom for the radiator, one on each side, driver, passenger side, and this is the bushing that we're talking about. And one goes in the passenger and one on the driver. So right now the passenger is in there, so we we have the passenger in there, and the driver's side is right on our hand. So those go in there. So they're pretty much the shock absorber. So now we got our radiator ready to go. So what we're gonna be doing is we're gonna slide this hose right into the radiator, and then we're gonna put our clamp, and then we're gonna feed it down, because if we try to put the clamp down there with the AC lines on next to it, we're gonna damage them, and we're not gonna be able to do it. So we're gonna put this right outside, and then we feed it down. Before you start putting your hose on, make sure you tighten the drain point, because now we want to keep the liquid inside, and we don't want to drain liquid. So tighten that before you start putting the radiator back in. You don't have trouble putting that hose into the radiator. What you do is you can add a little bit of D40, just rub it over into the hose, so that way it creates a coating of lubricant, and you can slide it and work it and set it, because this is going to dry out and wash off eventually. And then that way you can set the hose where it needs to, it sets where it needs to be. Now that we have our hose set up into our radiator, we can slide or clamp right into the hard point of the radiator fitting. So now that we have our hose and our clamp right into the point where we need it, we can start sliding our radiator down. And due to the hose being flexible, that's okay, because we can work with that. And one thing we want to say about this job is that you don't want to bend these fins, because these are the ones in charge of dissipating the heat when the wind goes through. So if you bend them and you get a lot of that around the radiator, you're going to have like a clogged radiator, because there's going to be no air going through it to grab the heat and dissipate it, so that way the liquid cools down inside the radiator. So now we feed the radiator into this car. So now we have the radiator in. We haven't supported it, because that way we can give a little more space to shove our fans in. So one thing is that the passenger side, remember, we have these openings in the bottom. They're just gonna slide into grooves, and the upper piece is gonna bolt down into the radiator. So sometimes I like to put the bolts right into the pieces where they came out, so I don't start losing bolts, or where do they go. So that's one tip that you can do. So now we can start sliding our fan in. When you're putting the fan in and you can't see where it's guiding, and this guy is in the way that the reservoir, what you can do is you can take it out. So that gives you a side point of view of where the fan is sliding into, so that way you get better view and reference. So now we slid our fan into the radiator on the passenger side, and we put one of the bolts. We're about to put the other bolt on the other side, so that way we secure it, or we just set it so it doesn't wobble around. So we just put it, present it, and then we can start putting our wiring back together. And we're about to put the fan on the driver's side, and for that, that fan slides right into the bracket or the square, that the fan slides right into there. On the bottom, on the upper piece, we bolt it down with the 10mm bolts that is required. So then we can start, and then once we do that, we can put the brackets for the radiator on the top, and then we put the upper hose, and then we put the clamp down for the AC line. So we have put both fans in. So now we're putting the brackets that hold the radiator to the upper piece of the frame. And then once we put them, we put the 10mm bolts that they are required to be in there. Once we do all that, we tighten the bolts, so that way everything's falling in place. So now we can put the clamp for the AC line down to the frame, and we can tighten both the frame and the clamp to the line. So now that we put all the fans, tightening all the bolts, don't forget to put and plug your fans, because if you don't do that, and then you have a brand new system, liquid and everything, and you're like, the car overheated because you never plugged in your fans. So what we have done is we took this hose off of the engine so it wouldn't be on the way when we were extracting our fan, because it would be just on the way. So we have put it back into the engine. We're gonna slide it right into the radiator, slide the clamp, put it on, and then we put our overflow or reservoir back in for the coolant, and then we can start filling up our radiator with coolant because everything's back on place. So now we put our reservoir back in for the coolant, slide it into its groove, and then we plug it back into the new radiator, and then now we can start filling up our radiator to burp out the air out of the engine. So now that we have put together everything, we're gonna add the coolant to the engine or to the radiator. We're gonna fill it up, and then we got our spill-free funnel with these fittings, and we got the right one for the radiator for this one. And then we're just gonna put our funnel, feed all the coolant that we can, and then we're gonna let it halfway. So then we run the engine so the air gets burped out. So this funnel is gonna help us get all the air pockets that are trapped in there out as much as we can, because if you don't use this tool, what we're doing, we're building the highest point on the liquid with the funnel, so that way it keeps burping the engine. These funnels, we're gonna leave you the description of this funnel, so in case you are interested on getting it, so that way it's gonna help you a lot, and it's gonna save you money because you can do the job quicker. We're gonna be putting our blue coolant. This is for Asian vehicles, and what it is 50-50. You don't have to add any water. It's ready to be used. So this is blue, like we said, and it's for Acura, Honda, Infiniti, Mitsubishi. So any Asian car, there's other models, and it gives you the dates or the years of the models and up. So we're gonna be using this, and we bought 2 gallons. So we're gonna add as much as we can to the system so we can fill it up and get it back to normal. With the engine off, we're gonna add as much as it goes in, and once it doesn't go anymore in, we're gonna turn our engine on so the water pump circulates and it gets all the air out. So we just let the funnel do its job and gravity takes over. So that's why I like these funnels. Here we are adding our 2nd gallon, so we're just gonna fill up the funnel halfway. So then we turn on our engine, so that way with the water pump is circulating, it's gonna push or force the air pockets to come over to the radiator, and the funnel is gonna release them, and then it's gonna fill that space with liquid. So we just fill it up to halfway and turn on our engine. Now we're gonna let the engine run and heat up to normal temperature, so that way the system opens and circulates the coolant. That way all the air that is caught or is stuck in the engine comes over to the radiator, and it gets released through the funnel, and then that fills the spot with the liquid, because we want as much air out of that engine so everything works properly. So there's no overheating air pockets in the system. So we just let it circulate for a little bit. So another thing that we want to do is we want to fill up our reservoir or overflow container with coolant. That way, whenever the radiator or the system asks for more coolant in the future, this guy is going to feed that demand. So we want to make sure that we bring it up to that level. There's some air pockets that are still coming out, and that's good news. We want to see that. We want to see the air coming out because we're filling in the system with coolant. So as you can see, there's more air coming out, and this funnel is helping to making the highest point right at this point. So the engine is burping the air through the system. So as the air comes out, the system is filling it back in with coolant. So that way we have no air pockets. The less air pockets that we can have in there, the better, because the system is work better and more efficient. And well, folks, hopefully this video was useful and helpful. That way you can replace the radiator on your 94 to 2001 Acura Integra, and that way you save money on the labor and you just need to buy the part. The radiator, on our case, it cost us about $120 plus the coolant, which we use about 1.5 gallons. And then if you want to replace the hoses and the thermostat, that just depends on you as well, because it's recommended to do that if you do this kind of job. And with that said, folks, for our friends who are watching our video, haven't subscribed to our channel, please subscribe. If you like a video, give us a thumbs up, share it, and we'll see you soon with more videos here en el canal, El Chano Jose.